Hello everybody, welcome back. My name's Pep if you haven't been to this channel before, and today's video is a little bit of an impromptu video because I have been trying to think of a topic to talk about for a video that isn't a straight up review of a scent. And as it so happens, my 14-year-old, soon to be 14-year-old son was decluttering his room in general. And he kind of sort of gave me back a few fragrances that I had decluttered from my wardrobe and given to him first option before I tried to sell them. So they weren't his style after giving them a bit of a chance. And I'm going to talk about them here because at one stage over the last 5 or 6 years, I owned these, and at various times I actually quite liked quite a few of them. There's a couple here there's one that I've never really talked about on this channel, but I'm going to go through them because I'm coming back to them. I'm just going to give them a quick sniff, and I haven't smelled them in a long time. And I kind of wanted to record on video how I'm feeling about them, or how I feel about them now. So I'm going to start with Versace blue jeans. Now, I need to tell you that this is actually one that my son really liked to wear, but he's kind of moved on to, he's going through a Michael Jordan legend phase at the moment, and he really enjoys that one. But he did basically drain this bottle of Versace blue jeans. Now, a lot of these bottles here are bottles that when I was in the throes of buying and collecting, a lot of these ones came up as great value cheapies, stuff that punches above its price weight. And, I am as vulnerable as anybody else in getting caught up in that. But over time, for me, it's proven to be a little bit of a false economy, because when these were actually sitting as part of my wardrobe, I'd constantly overlook them for better alternatives. So yeah, blue jeans was kind of like that. I think for the fact that you can buy 100 mils for, I guess, $20 Australian here in Australia, I can totally understand why this was popular back in the 90s. I mean, it is such a familiar, evocative smell of that time. Funnily enough, when I was, in the 90s, this was not something that I ever wore. I was definitely aware of it. I knew about its popularity, and I can totally understand why my 14-year-old son likes it, but it's no longer anything that I particularly feel comfortable wearing. I don't want to be ageist here, but this just feels very juvenile to me, to actually wear at my age. The next one I'll talk about is Ed Hardy's Love and Luck. Now, the reason I got this was because I had, or have had, decants of Creed's Millésime Imperial, which this is basically a copy of. And again, I saw this in my local pharmacy, had heard about it, and figured it's $30, and what's the harm? And again, like in the case of Versace blue jeans, this just kind of sat collecting shelf, and you can see how little I've been through it. And my son wore it a couple of times, but it wasn't his thing either. And I have actually got a video comparing this to Millésime Imperial. Look, it's a perfectly respectable yet copy of it, but I think going back to that video, I mean, I did that a few years ago. I mean, smelling this now and having recently worn Millésime Imperial, you can really tell the difference. And the only the only thing I'll say about this is this, in terms of performance, if you're not considering the actual composition, the smell of the Creed, this definitely outperforms Creed's Millesime Imperial. But again, this just doesn't, just it does really lack the sophistication of the Creed. And I'm no Creed fanboy, but there is definitely a more quality perfume that Creed produces compared to this. And you are, not that you're probably getting your money's worth with the Creed, but you're also getting what you paid for with Ed Hardy's Love and Luck. Now I'm going to talk about a few that I actually did enjoy wearing at one time or another. Now, this one here is still what I consider to be a really good perfume, particularly at the price point. Okay, and it still has a lot of fans. This is Aramis Havana, and I have a review of this as well. Now, when this was, I'll just say that surprising. I was actually surprised when my 14-year-old son decided he would like to have this bottle, because the thing about this one for me is it's got the opposite effect to the blue jeans, in that this really feels like a, a little bit of a throwback to me. One, again, that I personally no longer feel comfortable wearing. As much as I used to like it, something's shifted in me. I mean, I totally expect taste to be a little bit of a moving feast at times. There's always going to be perfumes that I love, always. And perfumes just like Havana and a couple of others here that I loved at one time and just seem, wearing this again, it seems like a stranger to me, like someone you knew really well a long time ago, meeting again and realizing that you didn't really know them. That's the kind of relationship I have with something like with Aramis Havana. This one may be a surprise to some of you because I this is one of the first perfumes I bought when I was starting to buy multiple perfumes. This is Bottega Veneta Pour Homme, the original EDT. The only reason I can logical explanation I can give for me decluttering this particular perfume is that, as lovely and elegant as it is, and it's still it's still a really, it's one of the better pine notes out there that develops into this lovely soft green leather. I think it's mainly because I've never been a huge fan of pine, so it already kind of had that disadvantage going for it. And in terms of a leather scent, I had lots of other alternatives to this. So as much as I liked this as a perfume, and I can't fault it too much, in the end, this started to get overlooked for other perfumes. And this was a pure case of a dust collector that was still a perfectly good perfume. I never felt like wearing it after a certain time, so there was no point in me keeping this. Bentley for Men Intense. I've done a review of this. I have spoken, I think I might have done a review where I also compared it to its more expensive, I guess, closely related Idol from Luban. I definitely always felt there were differences between the fragrances, and again, for me, Bentley Intense was something I enjoyed wearing, and I did purely based on a little bit of hype and the fact that this smelled like something that I actually really loved at the time. I really loved Idol. It was one of my favorite perfumes, and I really wanted to see whether you could replicate it in a $40 version. And to some extent, it did. There are some aspects about this that Idol doesn't have. I find this to be a bit more leathery than Idol, and probably there's more incense going on. But again, I think this, as well as the next fragrance I'm going to talk about, was a victim of my taste changing, moving away from kind of this sweet, boozy oeuvre that I had gone through a phase of. And I guess that's a good segue into talking about Pure Malt by Thierry Mugler. Again, when I first got this, when I was getting into collecting, like I said, I was very into, I just moved in from this gourmand stage into this boozy, sweet booziness, and thinking how sophisticated it all was at the time. And one day I decided to wear this as my scent of the day, and I realized how just kind of sweet and overly synthetic it was. To me, in my mind, it had lost all its sophistication. And it suddenly, this was kind of like an overnight, I really don't like you anymore. It's not that I don't like it. It's just that it really, yeah, it just smells like lolly water to me. Like, people still like this, and the whole pure, pure line, the Amen line. But in terms of pure malt, this is just sugar. It's it's really sweet liquor, drying on my skin, and I feel like someone spilled drinks on me at a party, and it's just drying on my skin. It's just too sweet, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. So it's interesting smelling all of these perfumes again now. I guess I'm kind of pleased that I definitely have no regrets about decluttering these fragrances. But I do want to talk about one in particular that I gave to my son. And I've never spoken about this particular perfume on my channel, but in some ways it was a perfume that has kind of led to all of this. About 6, 7 years ago now, I got a gift for Christmas, and it was unusual because I wasn't often gifted perfumes, and at that time I was, like a one perfume guy. Would spray the same thing every day. I was wearing Boss Sport or something like that every day. Anyway, I got this as a gift. It was Molten Brown. This one's Tobacco Absolute. And I remember at the time, it was, I was kind of, you can see that like I nearly finished the bottle. At the time, it was a scent that seemed so different to the stuff that I was used to. So, I was probably wearing a lot of aquatic, freshy fragrances, and just like sort of, I wasn't thinking about perfumes, and it just was a part of my daily grooming: deodorant and some aquatic perfume. I got Molten Brown Tobacco Absolute, and what struck me was how different it was to what I was wearing. I just want to refamiliarize myself with this, because I find that this is a very underrated, straight up warm, spicy tobacco perfume. There's not a lot going on, but what's going on is done really well. I think that for me, this, I wore this every day for a good, 7 or months, and until I then bought one new perfume, a couple of other new perfumes, and then this all started. So I if you love a tobacco note and perfume, definitely I think for a cheaper option, check out the Molten Brown. They do other perfumes, but I'm not overly familiar with this one. But I just wanted to mention this one because actually this is theoretically what kicked all of this off for me. It's not a special perfume, but it has now a little bit of meaning to me. And my son's worn it a few times, and again, I think he finds it probably a little bit too mature for him, but it's a perfectly reasonable tobacco fragrance that probably doesn't get enough love. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to talk about. I was just finding looking for a topic, and I thought he's getting rid of these, and now I've got a couple of bottles I need to sell, and it would be interesting to revisit them now that I have not worn them for a while, and see if I still have, well, if I have any regrets about getting rid of them. And thankfully, my decluttering, as I've mentioned in other videos, I've not had any regrets whatsoever with the bottles I've gotten rid of. All right, it's my Friday night. I'm going to get out of here and have a drink or two, and I'll see you all very soon. Okay, bye.